Oh, I am going to. We want to welcome everyone again to another one of our live streams today. We are glad that you're here to be with us. We are going to discuss the issue of immigration. This is our second episode on the topic of immigration. We had a previous session with Mako Nagasawa, where we began to unpack some of the complexities around immigration, how it intersects with economics, foreign policy, and theology. We also acknowledge ways in which we, especially those of us in the church, may be complicit in systems that marginalize or exclude. And so we're mindful, of course, of the growing tension in our country as the mass detentions and deportations continue to tear families apart, maybe sow fear in immigrant communities and to raise questions about justice, dignity, and the soul of our nation. So today we want to build on that first conversation now by continuing to ask what it means to be a faithful follower of Christ in a world of borders, walls, policies, and how can we bear witness to a different kind of kingdom. And we're going to do so by looking at one of the stories behind all the headlines. As usual, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Danny Hall. So, Danny, welcome.
Good to see you, everybody, again.
All right. And Danny, we've talked before, and I know we have Bikonzi and Clint on the screen as well. We'll introduce them in just a second, but we've talked before about how important it is to hear the story of the other. You know, that we talk about Israelis and Palestinians, and one of the things I often bring up is, do you know any Israelis? Do you know any Palestinians? Do we know the other? Do we know people on the other side of the border and why they're trying to get across? Or, we talk about Islam and Christianity. Do you know Muslims? Have you sat down and talk with them as well? So today we're going to have an opportunity to hear just an incredible story that will reveal really the human side of immigration and the refugee issues. And so I want to welcome today Bikonzi. I'm going to say, I hope I say this correctly, Moise?
Moise.
Oh, dang it. Failure number one. Sorry about that. Bikonzi Moise and Clint Leavitt. Did I say your name right, Clint?
You did. Yep, you got mine
good.
right.
All right.
Yeah.
So Clint is a pastor here in the Phoenix area. I've gotten to know Clint over the last several years, and he's the author of an upcoming book called Cockroaches, God, Death, and Mangoes: The True Story of Bikonzi Moise. The book is available on Amazon for pre-order and it's scheduled to be released in September. So Clint and Bikonzi, I want to welcome you. All right, and Clint, why don't you go ahead and introduce Bikonzi for us?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Rob and Danny, for having us. We're really glad to join you guys and be a part of this really necessary conversation, especially in a year like the one that we are experiencing around the world in a variety of different ways. So just some background. Bikonzi and I want to let him really share about his story. He and I go back, 12, 13 years now, right about that, getting to know each other really in our undergrad of university. We both attended Grand Canyon University. And early on my freshman year, our freshman year there, we developed a bond on the basketball court, which was an important thing for us and remains an important thing, our competitive energies. We want to be on the same team. That's always the move if we can. But beyond that, we got to spend some time with a couple other friends that we developed a relationship with, traveling to California for a spring break trip. And with many hours in the car together, got to share a bit more of our stories. And Bikonzi got to share his remarkable story for hours, 2 to 3 hours. We kept asking questions. We kept wanting to get more details because it was remarkable to us. And for me, that experience was kind of a conversion moment. It was a moment where I was presented with a story and a history that I was completely unknown to me prior to meeting Bikonzi, completely new to me. And it forced me to ask a lot of important questions about how I could show up and use my gifts for the sake of those in the margins, and why, as growing up as a Christian, was I never taught about this part of world history, about the Christian's role in caring for the outsider and the other, as you mentioned earlier, Rob. And God's heart for the other that is just evident all throughout the scripture. Why was that never presented to me? And so it's kind of this conversion moment. And then over time, it opened up the opportunity. Bikonzi approached me to write a book about his story, which was an amazing gift that we've been working on for the last few years. And so I just refer to the story in general because I want to make sure Bikonzi gives in more detail and gets to describe it from his end. But yeah, that's our relationship. Bikonzi in general, he's a refugee from the Congo. So that's a way or an entry point into his story that he could share a little bit more about.
Great. Bikonzi, tell us more about your story, yourself, where you're from, and your country, where you were born, what it was like before you were forced to flee. What do you remember? And even about your family now before we get into the details of your story.
Yeah, a little bit about myself now. one, I am married and I have 3 boys.
Oh, no,
I have a
wonderful.
boy that's going to turn 4 in June, and I have a boy that's 2, a little over 2, turned 2 in January, and then I have another boy that just turned 4 months today.
Oh,
So
wow.
my home is very busy right now.
I
Right
bet.
on.
But I'm one of 10 myself. So even before the first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on this. So it's my
Sure.
pleasure to be here and share a little bit about what God has done in my life. But yeah, I'm one of 10 kids, 7 boys, 3 girls. Uh, my mom pretty much had all of us by the age of like 34, 35.
Wow.
I was born in a small village called Mulenge in Congo. It's like between Congo and Rwanda. So there's a lot of mix with Rwanda and Congolese in that area. So yeah, so that's where I was born. But we actually moved to the city when I was probably like 1 or 2, because my parents just wanted once I started having kids, they wanted a better life for us to go to school because the little village really didn't have much school and they didn't have a lot, so they wanted better opportunities for us. So to we moved to like Kinshasa. So we moved to the city when I was really really little. But yeah, more about my family now. I work for a nonprofit called Mission One. Um, Oh yeah, that's great. Someone's pulling it up. Yeah, I work for a nonprofit called Mission One. Wow, you can't even see. Sorry, I got distracted. Never even really looked at the map to be able to see where it actually is. But it's very similar, somewhere close to Rwanda and Burundi there, like in the middle with where like the borders with Congo for those people that like actually like seeing a view of where it's at. So, um, but yeah, I work for a nonprofit called Mission One. I've been working with them for 5 years. Before even sharing about that, I never thought I would go into ministry. I've always felt the heart to love people and care for people. I just never felt the need to do it in another country, which is pretty funny because I'm from another country. Um, but after we graduated from GCU, one of the people there, that worked in spiritual life offered me a job in spiritual life. So I started working as the local outreach coordinator. Um, and doing that, pretty much what we did there at GC was we started different ministry to provide young people or college students opportunity to be able to serve. So like we would start things like the special need program where people can go volunteer and learn that if they're passionate about that, foster care, prison ministry, all that. So I like loved serving in that way, serving in my own actual physical community. And then 5 years ago, by God's grace, somehow I got offered this opportunity to go work for this nonprofit. And pretty much, we do a bunch of different stuff. But what I specifically do is I build relationship. We have 10 partners in the Middle East, in Africa, and Asia. And what we do is we join leaders in other cultures, in other countries, like in Kenya, in India and Indonesia, in Pakistan. And what we do is we come alongside them and help them learn how to pretty much really help them change things that's happening in their community. So we teach the organization how to be self-sustained. We help them plant churches. We help them, go in areas and plant churches where there's no churches. So my job is so much fun. I get to my biggest thing is building deep relationship with people. When I do that, then we get to have conversations like this. We get to truly take our mask off and really have deep conversations. So I've been doing that for 5 years, and I can't even, now that I'm actually in ministry, I can't imagine doing anything else. Even though since I was little, I was like, no, I'm never going to go to ministry, because I always viewed it as my mom's thing, because my mom has always had a heart to serve people in other country, which, the more you hear her story, the more you also understand why. But I've just been like, nah, that's just not for me. That's my mom. I'll help her if she does an event, but that's not for me. But yeah, the nonprofit is called Mission One, and they're awesome. Just their heart to love people where they're at, but also love people in other country. I just never had an opportunity to just see it done the way they are doing it. I just always thought if I wanted to serve in other countries, I had to be a missionary. And I was like, I don't feel called to be a missionary. I don't, Arizona is literally my favorite place in the world. I would not live anywhere else that's not Arizona. So I think for me, I've always had that of I want to serve people. I just always thought it was never going to be out of the country. But God works in a mysterious way. And now I literally work with people all over the world. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I don't know if you wanted me now to go deep into a little bit more about me as a little kid.
Yeah, I think we really encourage people to pre-order the book, be ready for when it comes out. And Rob and I obviously had the privilege of reading an advanced copy of it, and it's a fantastic story, well told by Clint. But it's a fascinating story, and we encourage everybody to get the book when it comes out and read it. But today we'd love for you just to summarize that, go back to those early days, what you remember, and then the journey, what was life like there for you and this whole journey you had to get to where you are now. So just give us a good overview of that.
Yeah. So first, I mean, even the way this book came along, my mom and my sibling had always talked about, like God has done so much in our life. We should, like, one of us should write a book. I've just never thought it would be me personally, because I don't know. It's not something I view myself doing. And I actually remember being in school my freshman year. Once I went to college, my faith with Jesus was becoming my own. I grew up in a Christian home. My grandpa was a pastor. My parents served in church. So like, I almost feel like my relation with Jesus was based off my parents and my grandparents' relationship.
Sure.
Like when I went to college was the first time I can actually, I don't know, decide to go to church or not go to church, because in our household, you weren't allowed to not go to church. So it was one of those things when I went there, I always, once I started building my own relationship with Jesus, I kept asking, what is it that I could, like, God, how can I serve you? I feel like I've just been lazy my entire life. How can I serve you? And I just remember one time I just felt God saying, hey, I've given you this awesome story and you're afraid to share it. As a kid, I never wanted people to feel bad for me. So I thought, God's blessed me. I'm healthy. I'm 6'4". I do sports just like everybody else. I do well in school like everybody else. So I always hid my story because I was always like, I don't want anybody to feel bad for me. So I never shared my story until I kind of, probably like maybe a few people, maybe 2 or 3 of my closest friends I shared with, because they kept wondering, but like, I just never shared it. And in college, as I'm telling God, like, I want to, like, how do I serve you better? And he pretty much, and again, I'm not one to be sitting here that I'm hearing the Lord all the time. I just felt this thing that kept telling me, I've given you this awesome story and you're afraid to share. What if it can like impact one person? And of course, as a freshman in college, I was like, nah, that's not me. I'm just hearing things. This is weird. So I ignored it. A few months passed again, and I was like, Lord, how can I serve you? And the same thing came. So weird coincidence, as Clint just shared about our trip to California, we knew each other playing basketball, and these random 3 white kids were like, hey, do you want to go on spring break with us? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't really know them enough to like be taking a trip. I don't know what their whole plan is. So I was like, oh, let me think about it. And for some reason, that just kept pushing me. Like, I felt like I needed to go on this spring break. And then Clint and I and our 2 other friends went on this spring break. And like, it was probably one of the best spring break I've ever gone to. And for some reason, God kept pushing me to like share my story with them. And I don't know why, but like, we got really deep into our story. And of course, from then on, I think Clint and I have been great friends from that trip and that was our freshman year until now. Him and I, I consider him one of my closest friends, which is why I also asked him to like, my goal to write the book was not like, hey, I want this awesome book that people love that like does this. I just wanted my story to be told. So if it can impact one human being to see how amazing God is, it would do that. So I asked Clint, because I knew Clint had been doing some writing and all that stuff. And I was like, hey, I would only ever write my book if you would be willing to write the book. So then Clint agreed to it. And then from then on, we've been on this journey of doing this, and we're very thankful to be here. But as a 6.5-year-old, what I remember most as a little kid is like Africa, when I lived there, was the most, again, I was a 6.5-year-old, so I didn't really know a lot happening politically, all these things happening. I just remember like living in Africa, it was such a community thing. It was such a communal thing. If my mom had to go to work and my dad both had to go to work, it wasn't one of those things where you needed a babysitter or you needed, like, oh, someone to watch your kids. No, you just told your neighbor, hey, I'm gone. I know it's 8. I'll be back at 5. Make sure my kids are fed. blah, blah. And then, so, you know, they would leave and then we would feel taken care of. It never felt like we needed some, because they would always check on us. It was like such a community thing to raise kids. You know, one of the things, like disciplining kids and all that stuff. If you were our neighbors and you were like close enough, you were part of raising the kids. So I just remember like, it was just done as a community and everything was done to like better the community. So I just remember a few months before we were taken, my mom all of a sudden got very strict. You know, we were allowed to roam around. We were allowed to do whatever we wanted, even as a 6.5-year-old. But I remember my mom was like, hey, don't leave past the gate. Because we lived in a house where like we were kind of like had a gate around our house. And she was like, do not leave. Just make sure you can play as much as you want. Just don't leave outside of our gate. And I'm like, as a 6.5-year-old, I'm like, wow, my mom really is worried about safety all of a sudden. But I didn't really pay too much attention to it. So, you know, my siblings and I would sneak out of the gate, or we mostly try to stay in the gate. But that didn't make sense to me until later on as an adult. At this time, like there was a war that had just trickled down to where we were at. A lot of people have heard of like the genocide that took place in Rwanda, because we've even seen film like Hotel Rwanda for those people that have seen it. So, I mean, I hadn't seen any of that. I didn't even know about war. All I cared about as a 6.5-year-old was like, was I getting food? Was I getting to play with my friends and all that stuff? So I just remember we had a tradition in my house where every night before going to bed, we would pray together. So we would sit down, we would pray together, because my mom believed she wanted the last thing we did together was we asked each other for forgiveness if we hurt each other that day. And also like the last thing we did was spending time with God. So I just remember, just like any other day, it was almost time for us to go to bed. We were sitting, you know, usually what took place in there was we would, if anyone felt some type of way that way, they'll say, hey, I want to apologize to blah, 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 one of the siblings for hurting your feelings or for doing this. And then afterwards, you know, we would sing. Usually my mom will lead us in some sort of song, and then someone will read scripture, and then we would pray, and then we would go to bed. As we were doing that and finished that, this one particular night, we heard military people jump over a fence and like trying to break into our house. So when that happened, again, we're going to be summarizing a lot because it would take too long to like get into that. When I remember at that time, the first thing I remember is my mom said, hey, you need to go. Because what she had believed, the number one people that would kill right away was like adult teens, like that were boys, or male, because those posed the biggest threat. So they would kill them right away, so that, you know, because women and kids, they just believe they can kill them slowly or they can die by starving them. But like, so my mom told my dad to hide. It's like, oh, you go hide, because like, you know, we'll have more time. So that night, I remember they put us in trucks. You know, I ran, tried to hide.
Was that the last time you saw your dad that night?
That was the last time I saw my dad.
Yeah.
So we ran, and a lot of us tried to scramble and hide, but I remember I hid under the bed, but it got so quiet because they had taken all my siblings, and I thought everybody was in the truck. So I got scared, and I was like, oh, then I started crying and screaming so they can take me too. Because I'm like, well, I don't want to be left by myself. So then they took us to this jail cell. We were there for 3 days, and you could tell it was like a jail cell where they had males and older teenager boys in one area, and then women and kids. And like, I mean, as a 6.5-year-old, I remember like hearing how much like they were torturing the male until they were able to kill them. So as we were leaving, you know, so then we got there, we were there for 3 days, and then they put us all back in truck. So when they put us in truck at first, they went and made a few more stops and picked up other families. So when they picked up other it was all families we knew. We were, again, like the area we live was so communal. We knew most of the people that were our neighbors. We knew everybody. And these were people that were super close to our family. So they picked them. It was like 3 other families that they picked up. So there's a total of 5 families in there.
And Bikonzi, can I interrupt for just like, was this religiously motivated? Was this because you're a Christian family, or was it just political?
No, it was, I guess you can call it a tribal violence. It was Hutus versus Tutsis.
And which tribe were you in?
Yeah. So I was with the Tutsi.
Okay, you were Tutsi. Okay.
Yeah. So the Hutu were pretty much trying to, and this is something that goes on all the time, even now in Congo. Like there's still conflict happening because they believe they deserve to be the main people, and they don't believe that Tutsi should be alive because I don't know. But then again, like I'm pretty sure they must have killed people that weren't even in the wrong tribe, because they would come to you. You know, they might come to you, Rob, and be like, oh, you got a pointy nose. You must be from somewhere else. Oh, you're 6 foot. You know, you must be the other tribe. So they kill you, which I'm like, there's no, again, I just don't believe. By my nose, you can tell exactly my roots and like exactly the tribe I'm from. But maybe they were better than telling those things than I was. So like, but yeah, so we were in that jail cell for like 3 days. And I remember leaving. They put us in a truck. My mom said she got a chance to say bye to my dad because they had captured him. So what happened with my dad was he realized they had taken his whole family. And at the time, there was 8 of us. At the time, there was 8 of us kids. My sister had gone to visit my grandparents in Rwanda. So technically, in the moment, we had 7 kids. And my dad was just like, you know, when my mom told the last conversation they had, because my mom like was asking him, like, why would he turn himself in? He said, well, what kind of man would I be if I just decided, oh, I'm just going to live my best life. I have all the money in the world and my wife and kids are all places that are. So in searching for us, of course, they captured him and put him in there. So they put us in this truck. They started driving us in the middle of nowhere. So technically they were supposed to drive us in the middle of nowhere and kill us so that they didn't have to move the bodies. Again, I'm a 6.5-year-old. This is a lot of how I just remember it. So, and at the time we spoke like 5 different languages. So we understood any language that we'd use. And at the main language they used was Lingala. And that's like the only one we used also at the time. But they stopped in the middle of nowhere and said, hey, this is where we're going to kill them. And I vividly remember, you know, where they getting us in the car saying, okay, here's where we're going to kill them. And I had a cousin. He's not my blood cousin, but his mom was like best friend with my mom. So we just call each other cousins. So he, as we get in out, he says, hey, I just saw an angel. He's like years older than me. He says, I just saw an angel. And we're like, wow, this is like such a bad timing. And we're like, what do you even mean? And then he's a kid too, like kid. It's like, what, this kid is tripping. But we asked him, what did he say? He said, the angel said, you guys are going to really suffer, but most of you guys are not going to die. Again, the timing was really bad because as that's happening, they're literally taking us to where they're saying, here's where we're going to kill them. Let's kill them here so we don't have to move them. So as soon as he says that, the military people start fighting with each other. They start fighting with each other, which is insane because they had killed so many people. For them to even think twice to kill people was like, again, God, you know, as you guys hear this story, there was no power of like things we could do. We didn't have guns. We didn't have anything. So as you hear the story, literally everything you're hearing me talk about is one of like, it's almost impossible to hear the story and not see God in so many ways. Of course, as a little kid, I didn't see it at the time because I was very angry with God, but there's so many now that as an adult, I'm like, wow, like God, the fact that the way God was protecting us without us even knowing is insane. So the military people start fighting with each other and said, hey, I don't want to have these women and kids' blood on my hand. Why don't we take it to the commanders and they can have it on their end themselves? Which, first of all, is unheard of because you just follow orders and you kill whoever because you don't ask questions. So they took us and we were in this place called Kananga. It was like the military area. It was like pretty much like being on like a Luke Air Force military base. So they had a huge abandoned building where the windows were broken and all this stuff. So they put us in there, pretty much waiting for us, for either the commanders to kill us or for us to die off, you know, to pretty much die off by starving and all that stuff. One of the few things they did at the beginning was they made the people that were old enough, like dig holes where they're going to like dig a hole where they're going to bury all of us so they didn't have to do all that stuff. But they put us in there and we were, again, a lot took place in there, but we were in there and I want to allow people to be able to ask questions, specific questions, but we were in there for 16 months. For 15 days, they tried to like starve us so that we could die off and God had other plans. They would come each night and take someone to go kill them. So they would come in. I remember there was a doctor in there. They took him and killed them. They took another person and killed them. I remember one night they came and they were going to take my older sister. And my mom's like, all right, you can take her as long as you take me too. You know, you could take both of us. And then the military person like pulled out a gun and was like, all right, if you don't tell her to let you go, I'm going to shoot both of you guys. And then my mom like looked at him and said, hey, you're going to shoot me? That would be you doing me a favor. I don't get to watch my kids suffer. Please shoot me. You would be like doing me a favor. And the thing that was hardest for them is like, as they were doing this, we would be talking to them in the native language. They're like, then they would always kind of like hesitate, like, are we killing our own people? Are we not killing our own people? Then, of course, they let my sister go. But as we were in there, so many things that took place was just amazing to see where it's at. My mom finds out she's pregnant also while we're in here. She did not know that when, as we went to this, that she was going to be pregnant. So she was not too happy with God. Like, why would God even let the pregnancy still happen? So then as we were in there, I remember, we went to bed one night, and another night we woke up and my mom had given birth. Wow. Which is itself, it's like my mom pretty much gave birth like 15 feet away from us, and we didn't even know it took place. Again, part of God protecting us as kids. I don't know, and honor and shame is such a big thing in our culture. Even though as we're dying, there's still so much honor in my mom not letting her kids see her give birth, and as she gave birth, she found out that she was pregnant with twins when she gave birth. So it wasn't even one, it was two. So it's just like things that were happening that took place, which like God, of course, had his own plan, and we didn't know. And we, as human, we always think we know what's best, but we were in there for 16 months. So my younger siblings, by the way, who were born there are healthy. They are 24, 25 years old. They in school, they've finished college. So they are they're healthy. When we first got here, they had to be in the hospital for 3 months because they couldn't eat. They had to be fed for their tube. But now they're just as healthy as any kid you would see. Their biggest issue is all of us are 6 foot or taller, and they're the only ones that are 5'10", 5'11", and they believe because they had a fairly high. So that's their biggest insecurity and biggest issue that they have in life is they didn't get to be taller than 6 foot. So
hey, they're just the point guards on the team. That's all. That's
exactly
fine.
You need some shorter people.
You need some scrappy little spud webs here and there.
Yeah, I as you're retelling the story, man, you keep mentioning these moments of God's kind of providence along the way that you experienced. Obviously, I know the details of the story and moving from that camp to a refugee camp and then ultimately to the U.S. Could you share a bit of the ways in which you experienced through people the work of God in those moments? Because obviously you're experiencing this vision early on of the angel, right? You're also experiencing these seemingly unexplainable, fortuitous events. But I also know, having heard part of the story, that there's a lot of people that stepped in remarkable ways. Can you share a couple of examples from maybe the camp and or beyond the camp to as you guys moved and resettled some of the fortuitous relationships that God worked through?
Yeah. So I think one of the main thing is most people don't know the president who was trying to kill us, his son actually ended up helping us, which is weird and unheard of again. And as I want to keep reminding people listening, the fact that now that I'm an adult and how I can see how God had a hand in literally everything that was taking place, and it just, so before we even get to how he helped us, one of the thing is, so when the twins were born, my younger siblings were born, the one thing my mom is, I think my mom's one of the smartest human beings. I don't know how she can. She named my two youngest brother after the two commanders at the military camp that was trying to kill us. Pretty much the worst people at the camp. She named my youngest two siblings their names and gave them the names of those two commanders, which, first of all, I would have never thought of that. And two, there's no way I'm giving any of my kid after someone that is trying to kill me and that's had a hand in killing my husband, all that stuff. But she also understood, I think this is God helping her really, one, forgive and love people even in the moments when they're trying to kill them. And as a kid, I definitely didn't understand that. But she also knew the value of names. In our culture, naming a kid after you is literally the greatest gift you can give anybody. In our culture, naming your kid after your name is bigger than giving someone $1 billion or $1 million. That's how big a name is. It's there's no better honor than this. Yeah. Again, which confused me as a 6.5, 7-year-old kid. My mom will give such a huge honor to these people that are trying to kill us. Again, at the time, I had so much anger and so much not forgiveness that, of course, I couldn't see it. But when she did this, the wives, somehow the news got to the wives of those commanders. And they were so honored that they came and visited my mom and said, they just were so like, they felt so honored and so blessed that she still did that. So they were able to like bring her some medicine, bring her some pots to like make a few things in. So one, that's like them helping us. Like that just helped my mom to be able to like feed the kids better. Cause like, it's hard to breastfeed when you're not getting food, you know? So these two women came and visited us and were able to help my mom with like some of the things that she needed with like for the kids with medicine, because they felt so honored. Of course, as they did this, it was all in hiding of their husband because they weren't allowed to pretty much do that. But still, like the story got to them and they were able to do this. But also another group of people that helped us was like, you know, we had where we lived, we had military people that surrounded the building that we were in, which I don't know where we would have gone anyways, but they surrounded us to make sure any move you made, they were watching, you know? So if, you know, and the doors were broken, the windows were broken. So when it rained, the whole place flooded, you know, military people would come in. I remember one time, one of them got drunk and came in with a grenade and say, I'm going to blow everybody up. I don't know why we're waiting for them to die. Let's just get rid of them and be done with it. But some of the older ones got more laid back in the sense of like, we're going to kill them. Why let them kill them? But why kill them instead of like, let's allow them to like almost be slaves or have opportunity to like serve? That might not feel like an awesome thing, but that also is a huge part of why we were saved. So what happened was the older siblings in that we were with that could work would go and work for these military people. To go get water was like multiple miles downhill. So like that was a big deal that these women and their families didn't want to do. So they were like, use these people as much as you want until they die off. One of the things that they didn't know is like the women would always like, when they did that, would always give us food or give us something to take back. So that pretty much kind of kept us going and kept us alive and all that stuff. So these women of these military people were pretty much keeping us alive without knowing that they were keeping us alive, because they had so much compassion in their heart. Every time people worked for them, they would say, okay, you worked for us. We'll give you some rice and beans to eat. And most of the older kids would work and then we'll come back and bring the food, you know, because a lot of us were young. So like for someone like me, I wasn't able to really carry a gallon of water, 5 gallons of water down a hill, you know, at a 7-year-old. I was not able to do that. So like, of course, there was just people that were placed. I mean, and again, Clint, and if we want to talk about people that really like ended up helping us also, you know, when we went to a refugee camp, so we went to a refugee camp in Cameroon. I know I'm jumping a lot of pieces, but again, we're summarizing everything.
Yeah.
So feel free to stop me and ask me another question.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. Yes. Take us right to the story. Keep going.
Yeah, when we went, so after the military, a lot of things happened that ended up helping us. But when we went to the refugee camp in Cameroon, there was thousands of people there waiting to leave, you know. And what would happen, you know, what I knew, like what I learned, and as I got older and I asked questions, was, you know, the Red Cross would come, see the camp, see the people that they can take. And there was like a list of people trying to go. And then what they would do is they'll come back either to America or, you know, anywhere, Europe, anywhere else, and they'll get their paperwork. Then they'll go back and get those people. So the thing is, so this two people, a lady her name is Sheikha, and a guy named Sasha happened to come while we had just arrived at those area. We had arrived like a few months before. So when we got there, they show up to get people. You know, they had a list of people that they were supposed to come, or they would come in and check on to see who they're going to take. Again, at the time, we spoke zero English. So a lot of the things we're also understanding is through what we're seeing. So the words that were being exchanged, I can't even fully, I'm just forming at the time, I was like almost 8 years old. I'm forming what I'm seeing. More of like me hearing them exactly. Of course, I've heard more of the pieces of the story as I've gotten to know these two people. But they came in, and one of the leaders at the camp said, hey, before you go, make sure you look at those 5 tents. And they were like, no, we're not going to look in those 5 tents because we know what's going to happen. It's going to be people that really need us, and we can't even take them anyways. So they say, oh, we're not going to do it. So the day before they left, they're like, okay, we're going to look, but we're not going to take them, just so you know. And then, of course, she comes into our tent and sees my mom and my 2 youngest brother, who had just been born in probably one of the worst situations you can possibly be worse in. Literally, they were all head and no body. We still joke around with my younger siblings because we still have some pictures that they took at the time. But it was literally, we said you wouldn't have been able to walk because your head was literally all that you weighed. So after they saw them, they're like, there's no way we can leave without taking them. So they told us, all right, we're going to go back, and they're like, we're going to take you guys with us. So they're telling us they're going to take us with us because we got a piece of paper that said Arizona. That's all I remember as a kid. Of course, maybe more might have happened with my mom and my older siblings, but all I remember is there's a piece of paper that said Arizona at the time. And again, I remember that it was Arizona because as I got older, people told me that that's what he said. And we were so confused. She got a big van. She put us all in there and says, we're going to go. She took us. We get to the airport, and it was like a cargo plane. And all we see is we're in a van, we're in like this big bus, and she's arguing with the pilot. So the two people, the guy and girl are arguing with the pilot for like 30 minutes. Clearly, now as we talk about it, we know they're arguing because the pilot's like, you don't have paperwork, so I can't take him. Doesn't matter how you want to save him, I'm not going to take him. Somehow, after they argue for 30 minutes, they let us in the plane. And we got in the plane, and that's how we ended up actually coming to America. And then we've been here our entire life after that. But yeah, those two people played a huge, huge role. And I mean, I know Clint at the end of the book kind of talks about the two people that made the biggest impact once we got here, and I know we'll get more into even, I didn't get to even share. When we got here, we didn't speak English. We didn't know anyone. We literally couldn't say one word in English, at all. So when we got here, eventually, after being here for a little bit, my mom wanted to learn English. Was like, hey, I need to we had a DCS person who he's like, hey, is there anywhere I can go learn English just so I can be able to take the bus, go grocery shopping, or get a job or something to be able to support my kids. So she goes to this class. She's in class trying to learn English. One day as she's leaving, she's speaking in French because my mom speaks 9 languages still. So she's speaking French, and the lady who was teaching French class there heard her, and because they were both about to leave, she's like, oh, you speak French. And so she started talking to my mom in French, and they connect. Her name is Deborah. Lee. So they connect through that. And he happens to be one of the time as they go in, the classes are ending. She asked my mom if she can give her a ride, and it was raining. So my mom's like, instead of taking multiple buses, yeah, of course I would love a ride. She drops my mom off and then leaves. And then all of a sudden it became a thing. She wanted to drop my mom off. And the next thing is she asked, can I meet your kids? Because of course, if you ever talk to my mom for more than 2 minutes, she'll talk about her kids. That's her greatest accomplishment. I don't know. It's sure. What she feels like she has done the best. So she talked about them. And then of course she ended up was like, man, I would love to meet your kids. And again, as I say, God was working in a miracle. We had just gone through the craziest thing for my mom to trust a stranger with her kids. That itself is even God protecting my mom's heart, and just itself is also a miracle. So we met her. Again, we met her the first few times. We couldn't even say a word. She would wave. We would wave. She would come in and hang out with us. She was able to communicate with my older siblings who spoke French. But besides that, us young people, because I didn't get a chance to actually go to school and learn French. We couldn't communicate with them besides wave and say hi and smile. But eventually she brought her husband also. She's like, my husband's got to meet them. We met her husband, and those two people in my life has shown me Jesus better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And the reason why, it's because they met us where we were at and said, I still love you. They met us where we were at and said, you are loved and you're wanted. And again, we were coming from our own country, our own people saying, we don't want you. We don't love you. We don't want you to pretty much be breathing. And why is these two American people saying, we want you? So it was very confusing for us. But the thing is, why we saw so much Jesus in them. And if you talk to a lot of my siblings, besides my mom and God, of course, these two people have made the biggest impact in our life. If if they never came in our life, like I honestly don't know where we would be. Of course, God is very powerful, so we could have still turned out okay. But I believe without these two people, we might have gone into drugs, we might have gone into crazy thing, because at that point you're just trying to fit in. But they took us in and said, I don't know why they loved us, but they were there, and they didn't just say things, they showed us. And I have like a million stories I can share of how they showed us, like, that we love you, that we want you, that you're worthy to be loved. And at that time, first of all, we didn't even know how to be loved, because we were still dealing with things of like, but they were consistent. They came over, they took us to the park, they did barbecue with us, and they were like the only family we really knew at the time too. Like, I mean, and they weren't even blood. But yeah, those two people, that to me has made like the biggest. My oldest son is named after the husband, and my sisters who have daughters have named them after Deborah. So yeah, so my oldest son's named Lyman, and that was the husband's name. But yeah, with that, he became like a father figure to all of us after we had just lost a father. And he, honestly, if I could be half of a father as he was, I would have done an amazing job. So like, they took us in and said, hey, you don't need to change. You don't need to be American. I just want to be here. And I want to be a source of, like, whether you need someone to listen to, whether you need someone to give you advice, we're here. They're just close. They're as close to us as my siblings. That's how, I don't know how else I'm trying to put them in words, but like, it's really, really hard to, like, and I know in this time, we'll probably, as we talk about like what it means for refugee people, for us Christian people, I think for me, the biggest thing is just showing up. God's called us to like serve widows, orphans, people in need, and I think for us, one thing that stops us is we feel like I need to have a lot of money. I need to have things figured out. No, I think sometimes the people who are living in our backyard just wants us to show up. They just need us to be there and say, hey, I'm just here. I don't know how to help you. We don't even speak the same language. I'm just here. So I think for us, that made the biggest difference. And if you talk to like some of my siblings, some of them, they've talked about openly, if it wasn't for these two people, they would have committed suicide. So like the way they impacted us by just being there allowed them to, I don't know, make that decision to not do that. So yeah, like I can't talk enough about them, and I don't want to. Of course,
no, it's so important. That's kind of on the lines that we're trying to understand all the things that we need to learn from your story. I want to backtrack real quickly, and maybe Clint, you can answer this one, perhaps, or both of you can. One of the things that I learned, Rob and I are really committed to trying to expose the way, or how Christians consider the ways that some of these things in the world, these problems in the world, are also products of our own history. You mentioned in the book about how some of the intertribal warfare that went on actually had its roots in some of the colonial powers, and how they came in and disrupted what was normal life. We've all heard stories of colonialism that gets framed in different ways for us. And I was kind of new about the sort of taking resources and exploiting resources. I'd never understood until I read your book how much the colonial powers had in terms of actually fomenting discord. I want to make this so we can understand. I think our goal is we tend to look at ourselves as somehow righteous saviors and all this stuff, rather than actors in creating these problems. It's true in immigration. We saw that last week in our discussions on immigration and how our policies affected. How has the history of colonialism actually been a driver for some of the warfare that goes on between these tribes?
Yeah, it's a astute observation, and I think so necessary for us to see the larger systemic nature of a lot of these conflicts, that they are not simply individuals and bad apples making bad choices, that there are systems and structures that are centuries in the making that produce the conflicts that we see in front of us. And that's actually really biblically rooted too, right? You see all sorts of instances in the Old Testament where Israel is facing the kind of consequences or trickle down of their choices centuries earlier. And you see David repenting for the choices of his ancestors, Nehemiah repenting for the choices of his ancestors, that sort of thing. So I think one, it should prompt us. And in this particular case, to consider the ways that European colonization has produced a lot of these issues and a lot of these conflicts, or has at least amplified them and kind of left them there. And so that was one thing for me in researching the Second Congo War, both Congo Wars, but particularly the Second Congo War, which is kind of where Bikonzi's story was embedded. Just seeing the ways in which European colonization and then a rapid exit from that space without resolving many of the structures that they built actually perpetuated this sort of violence, and is at least a contributing factor in gasoline on a fire, if not the spark itself. So yeah, there's certainly causality that's evident there that we need to reckon with. And I think one part of the story that we want to try to bring out is that sort of effect, that sort of fire, can only be put out by folks who are bold and brave enough to stand in the midst of those systems as they burn. And so throughout Bikonzi's story, you will see in the book all of these instances of folks who are embedded in this conflict and have their own stuff going on, but who are willing to put their own stuff on the line out of compassion for this family. And for us as Americans, recognizing not only the way that colonial powers have brought about, and even America's colonial influence in the world has brought about issues, but also the ways that we as individuals who inhabit that system can work against it and can avoid complicity. And actually, those are the things that the courageous acts of folks in hidden and often forgotten ways are actually the things that keep humanity alive and going.
And one of those factors, just to be clear, wasn't it, Clint, that if I understood your explanation of it in the book correctly, they actually were contributing to the sorting and ranking of different peoples. It was the colonial powers that created these categories of hierarchy and conflict. They would, by physical appearance and all, they did all kinds of racial profiling, we would say, in order to exploit the labor force and resources they created. They actually engendered racial strife in that. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, no, you've nailed it. The idea was, how can we exploit these differences and divisions? That Bikonzi started to reference things like facial structure, things like skin tone, things like language, all in order to economically gain. Which is funny that you see it in a lot of European colonization, American colonization. Funny is not the right word. Interesting and noteworthy and worth remembering for us how economic a lot of this was. How economically motivated it was. So that was central to, and so in the book, that's kind of in the subtext, and I give kind of a note at the beginning and at the end that kind of explains some of that together, that makes it more kind of come to the surface. But
and I think the reason I wanted to bring it up is I think it's so easy for us as Americans to proverbially look down our nose at people and places in the developing world and assume that their problems are created by their own inadequacies.
Yeah, exactly.
Not by the imposition of our exploitation on them.
Or if you even press into that more, oftentimes it's this Western exceptionalism that says they need our civilization, or they need our societal structure.
Yes, completely.
And what often is actually true is that our societal structures were the very thing that produced a lot of the violence that we're saying it could now solve. So it's a really important point to raise.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We got about 10 more minutes here to finish up as well. We want to remind everyone that Determined Truth is a 501c3 nonprofit. We try to bring these live streams and podcasts and all kinds of things to you to help the church to be the church and to challenge the church to be the church. And what can we do and how can we be involved? We want to thank Bikonzi and Clint for being part of this as well. We have a whole series of live streams coming up. The next 3 weeks, we have live streams coming up on Israel, Gaza. We have 2 Christian Zionists the next 2 weeks who are beginning to question Israel and beginning to question, hey, I don't think I can support Israel anymore. So we want to encourage you to listen to those. And then for the next 3 weeks, all that information is on the determinedtruth.com on the events page. If you want to get the Determined Truth newsletter, the monthly newsletter, go to the contact me page tab on determinedtruth.com. And just fill that out. We'll get you on the email list and keep you informed about all these live streams and things that are going on the blogs and the podcasts and everything else that we have going on. As we try to be a voice to challenge the church to be the church, and really to do what Clint is challenging us to do, to be that prophetic voice that speaks up and says, hey, wait a second, this isn't about their inferiority. It's about us and the things that we've done as colonial powers, which is what the book of Revelation is all about, Clint, right? In the beast and the heart of Babylon, which we'll be doing a whole bunch of things over the course of the summer
You've
on
spent
that
some
as
time
well.
with
So,
Revelation recently, yeah, Rob?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a bad book. I think it's actually pretty interesting. So,
Okay,
and
yeah.
in the epilogue, gentlemen, as we finish up here, maybe 5 to 10 more minutes left, you note that you're thinking about writing a sequel because you think it's important to describe and discuss the challenges of the resettlement process. And by the way, Bikonzi, you did a phenomenal job telling your story, but I want to encourage everyone to get the book because there's
Yes,
so much that you
please.
left
So
out,
much more
obviously.
detail.
Yeah, there's so much more detail, and there's so many things like how did you go from here to, and just the whole survival if they wanted to kill you, you know,
It's a
why'd
great
they let you go to
story.
a refugee camp and all that stuff there as well. But you talk about the challenge of the resettlement process. What's the hardest part about your settlement here in the United States, and what do you want us to know? And then Clint, maybe you can chime in as well on some things that we can do as Americans, as Christians, or whatever, to be more active in these issues.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry about how I explained. I feel like I jumped everywhere.
No,
So
you're great.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Hopefully, it wasn't confusing. But I would say the biggest challenge for us was not knowing anyone. I think is a big challenge. I think when you go to a new place, you feel so displaced. But like I think for us, we were dealing with our own trauma, of course, from like coming from what just happened. But we felt, again, before we met the two couple, we felt not wanted by anybody in the world. So that was a big deal. And I think that's, for me, the biggest thing I encourage. Like, as a Christian, we were called to be more than just bystanders, Like, we're not saying you need to go and transform everyone's life, or you need to be like these couples that I talked about. I think we just need to be there so people feel seen. I think we didn't feel seen. We didn't feel wanted. We didn't feel any of that stuff. And we didn't speak the language. It's not like we could even be a part of society normally because we had no tools, no resources, and none of that. So I think for me, like the biggest thing I would like people to like know is like, we have so much more power in just being in a space than we think, Like what changed our life was not like that this couple were like the most like richest people. They were buying us big cars, big house, or whatever. No, like the biggest impact that they made us was said, you matter enough that I'm willing to come into your home and sit. You matter enough that I'm willing to just, and not once did, like I shared about how they showed me Jesus the most. We never had a conversation about them being Christian until maybe like 10 years later, 12 years later. They had never pulled the Bible and said, because I think that is the thing sometimes us as Christian, we get so sucked in. When I go visit someone, the first thing I want to do is save them. Or are you a Christian? You're not. Okay, let me save you. I think there's more in like our action, more in how we live life that can actually bring someone to Jesus than like you tell me how amazing Jesus is, but you not living the way you actually are describing Jesus. So I think the biggest thing I've wanted people to like honestly take from the book is like showing them like being there is just like being there for someone in need, like does so much more than like we would ever understand. My family has tried to like express to this couple how much they felt. The husband passed away a while back, but like even the wife, like we've shared about how big of an impact she made. And like if you talk to her, she's like, no, you guys I didn't make a big impact. You guys made a big impact in my life. And I'm like, I don't know how, because we couldn't offer much. So people, just as Christians, we're called to just be with poor people, to be with rich people, to be, because we are the hands and feet of Jesus. And if we're not going in hard places, if we're not speaking out for people that can't speak for themselves, then are we really representing Jesus? Because anything you read in the Bible, he never stood there and just said, oh, someone else will take care of it, which I'm guilty with that too. So I'm not even trying to like say this about people. There's times where I can get complacent and be like, oh, I'm not good enough to do that. We'll get someone else to do it. But like just showing up is bigger than you actually knowing exactly how to do everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good word, B. And I would just add, given everything that's happening in our culture, I mean, your audience may already know some of the ways in which recent financing cuts is going to affect not only refugees traveling to the US or who are already legally in the system, but also those in need around the world. We're talking if things, I read an academic paper today that estimated if USAID funding, for instance, is not returned to the levels that it was, we're talking dozens of millions of deaths over the next decade because of these choices. So we're not talking about some like budget cuts. We're talking about some major humanitarian fallout from this. And what I've seen and what I would encourage listeners to consider here in our own culture is this rampant fear of the other that is persistent and is perpetuated by lots of folks in power. And rampant fear of the other is almost always an easy ticket to oppression, because it will allow people to entrust folks who continue to enemize the other. And so what Bikonzi is talking about really personally, that I would see for all of us as Christians, is how can I be that single person who refuses to enemize the other, and who refuses to allow evil, as Robert Hayden would say, to allow evil to be our deliverance from evil. Hayden would say we must go on struggling to be human, though monsters of abstractions police and threaten us. And we need to reclaim a vision of the human world where man is permitted to be man. I think that is the heart that we need to embrace, where we do not get frightened and scared into seeing evil as deliverance from evil, but instead allow true goodness in these hidden acts to be our healing power, which is very much like Jesus, right? Who came and who died a life as a poor day laborer and rabbi and never wrote anything down, and had himself amidst the marginalized, and that hidden life has transformed history.
Man, again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and of course, we thank everyone for paying attention and watching. Spread this out, let everybody else know about it. Bikonzi, we're gonna have to get together on the basketball court. So, Clint, I'm ready to play. It's been a while. I guess I played in college 40 years ago. Gosh, it's crazy, Danny.
That's all right. I played in college 50 years ago.
Is that right? Yeah. So,
yeah.
Anyways, but
I'm the short point guard of the team.
Yeah. So, but thank you again so much. Appreciate everything, guys.
Mention the title of the book again.
The title of the book is Clint. You got it's Cockroaches. I'm trying to. Where's it at here?
Yeah, Cockroaches, God, Death, and Mangoes, which hopefully gives some nice dots that people want to connect. Pick up the book and you can connect those dots.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Available for pre-order now, and it comes out in September.
Available for pre-order on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, all the bookstores. And then, we'll be coming out officially on September 16th of this year.
Super. All right, great. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Guys.
Thank you guys for having us.